All right, great. I'm assuming you can all hear me decently well. Okay, there we go. So hi, my name is Panamdanam. And this is not a talk about how important design is. I understand you're all intelligent people. You already know how important design is. A little about me. I'm a freelance designer slash front-end developer slash illustrator. I've got a weekly comic, and I'm a serious coffee addict. And when I say serious, I mean very serious. So if you've got questions about coffee, we can discuss it later. I'm so happy to talk to you afterwards. Anyways, back to the design bit. I'm calling this presentation Design SOS because rather than telling you how important this is, it's more about key things you can do just to make sure your passion project or whatever project you're working on is reasonably well done. And when I say reasonably well done, I mean it looks professionally clean. It looks presentable, right? So I'm sure you've all got those projects where you're working by yourself and it looks off just a little bit. This is sort of like a quick guide on how to make sure that little bit is fixed as well, right? So yeah, the normal process of how I work with clients is clients or developers come to me with, the help, I need design, and help me with whatever wireframe or, mockups they need. And I go off, do my own process, come back and hand off the design to the developer. And then we, don't talk to each other again. Not really. And then I get paid. The designer goes, ooh, pretty. And, it's a happy day for everybody. We all get paid. But the developer never has to really think about the magic that I've put through or the process that I went through to get to that design. Why I have logical reasoning for where things are the way they are, right? As developers, you only ever worry about that when you're working without a designer, when it's your pet project. So, in your free time on your passion project, you've figured out the meaning of life, and now you've got to convey that to the public. Smacking yourself and, giving high fives and patting on the back, but it doesn't matter how awesome your code is, it doesn't matter how awesome your application is if somebody can't read it properly and understand what you're trying to say. And that's when the process of how we design becomes a problem, right? So back to working without a designer. I found consistently 3 things that is always the issue. And you know what's stupid about it is it's so common. You all already know these 3 concepts. Everybody preaches to you about these 3 concepts. The problem is they're so common, you forget about them. So, checklist. I can guarantee you if one of your designs kind of look iffy, it's one of these 3 things. White space, being consistent, and your contrast. It's always one of these 3. So now white space, I'm assuming you all know what white space is. Is there anybody here who doesn't know what white space is? Okay, there we go. So white space is basically your negative space. So can you see my mouse? So this is white space. So is this. All the little letter spaces between the lettering, they're all white spaces. Basically where your content is not sitting, that is white space. The more elements you have in one tiny space, the more they're competing for attention from the viewer. And that means none of them get served properly. So if you just add space around things, it's much more easier for the viewer to actually see it, understand what it is, and then move on to the next step. There's no confusion in that sense, right? So, example here, this site is not bad. It is not a ghastly site. It's reasonably well done. It serves its purpose well. The problem here, very obviously, is the logo, right? So they're hoping for it to be a banner. But the mistake they've made is they've made this logo so big, there's no white space around it, and you completely miss all the information below it. And that's the problem here. If that logo was a little smaller, it doesn't even have to be much smaller, just a little smaller, and just giving it space around it will automatically make a user's eye land on it first as a hierarchy point. the user will automatically see it because one, it's a great image, it's a nice logo, and two, there's so much space around it, it'd be so much easier to see it, right? But right now, this looks very congested because the whole purpose here was, oh, let's fill up the space, right? So things like this, most people don't notice all the time, but if you've got that little issue, if you look at it again, just give it a little bit more space, and it usually works out pretty well. Another site, I know Martin Fowler is a great developer. I am not commenting on his development. I'm sure he's amazing. What I am debating on is how he's used his white space. So when you first land on this site, what's the first thing your eye lands on? Yeah, and the image, that's where your eye goes. The human eye is always looking for human faces because that's what our nature is. That's like ingrained into our DNA. So we see his image and we kind of pass on his paragraph because it's so congested. We don't really spend the time to read what the paragraph is about. Considering this is his portfolio site or the piece about him, that's kind of an important bit, but you don't really see it or read it or comprehend the content of it because it's so congested in there. So traditionally, you can give font sizes about 12 pixels. If you're doing mobile responsive, 1M is usually good. It's not too tiny. The thing is, smaller text with space around it is more readable than larger text with little space. So if you look at this news and update, automatically you know what it is. You know it's a title. You know it's important of some sort, just because it's got more space around it. That's all. Like that's simply just adding a little space around it just makes it so much more easier for you to digest this bit of information. Any questions so far? Okay, moving on. Now, Joel on software, beautiful site. I actually have no critique on this site. I love this site. He's also a developer, and very simple site. But as soon as you land on this site, the first thing you're noticing is tidbits of information. His image doesn't take away from the information because it's black and white. It just stays there as a side note. But you notice immediately, this is a little bit of information, that's a little bit of information. It makes it easier for you to follow along. So you know what to read first, what to read second. If you want to read more, click here. It's all very logically organized. It's all very concise, and it's very easy to read it. You viewers who look at it are not scared about, oh my God, there's so much stuff here. No, no. It's very nicely packaged for a viewer to easily understand. He doesn't need a lot here. No images, nothing fancy, very simple site. But it serves its purpose very well. Now, on to the second point, being consistent. When I say being consistent, three things we have to worry about is colors, typography, and alignment. You don't need a lot of colors to say, what's important. You don't need red, blue, and green. And don't forget, black and white are colors. So treat them as colors. So if you've got black and you've got white, you've got one more color you can pick. The less stuff you have to manage, the better. So less is better here. So the less complicated it is, the less stuff you've got to worry about, color combination or whatnot, the more cleaner and the more likely that your project will come out with a more finished look. You can add stuff later if you need it, but start off with a baseline, right? So 3 colors, and when I say 3 font style, I mean, Helvetica, bold, regular, and light. 3 font styles. I don't mean Helvetica, Arial, and Times New Roman. Very much different, okay? So 3 font styles and 3 alignment patterns. Now, the thing about alignment patterns is if you have a pattern on how you've organized your site, it is highly likely your user will easily pick up on it and follow along. Much more easier for humans to understand patterns and follow a pattern. And that also means if you jar them by going away from the pattern once in a bloom, they understand that piece is important somehow, right? but patterning how you align things. If you start with left, right, left, continue left, right, left throughout. Don't suddenly switch it out. It's always being consistent in that sense, right? So now this site, the whole purpose of the site is to tell developers, Ruby developers, what sort of jobs are there. But when you look at the site, it takes you a while to realize what the purpose is. The site in itself has 9 colors on just this page, and almost 10 types of font styles, switching between serif and sans serif. I mean, it's a great, functional site. It does the functioning part of it very well. It's got its information very neatly laid out. It's also got tons of white space around it. What it's missing is consistency. There's different font here versus different font here, different font here versus different font there. You've got to realize when a person lands on your site, they're not just processing the information you're serving, but also how you serve your information. It takes them a while for their brain to catch up with their eyes and say, oh, this is what this means. So the easier you make it by being consistent, by giving them less stuff to process through, the quicker they're going to understand your purpose of why you've laid it out, of what you're trying to say. So, not bad site. Now, Uber Eats, beautifully done site. That image, catches your attention as soon as you land on it. Serves its purpose to draw your attention, make you understand it's about food. The green Eats part lets you know immediately this is not Uber, it's Uber Eats. The green part accentuates that logo just enough so you understand the difference. And again, they've got 3 colors here: gray, white, or like black, white, and the green, which makes it so easy for you to understand this is kind of important, this is kind of important. And you know exactly what to do on the site, even though there's not a lot of information on here. It doesn't need to be. It's so simply served. You know exactly what to do next and where to go from here. And that's the purpose you always have to look for when you lay out your designs or whatever your content you're trying to convey. Last bit, contrast. Now with contrasts, it's basically colors and images. And images, my dear friends, are colors. I know, blows your mind, right? But images bring colors to your site. So if you want color and you've only got black and white, if you add an image, it's bringing vibrancy. So really consider what images you pick because of that. You've all seen the Medium site. Beautifully done. You know what the best part about this site is? This image is so seamlessly integrated with this content. It doesn't take away attention from the content. It in fact helps accentuate the content. Makes you look more towards the content than the image itself. And the image makes sense in the whole context of it. And it brings in just enough color of that green with the blues and the grays and the browns, just enough to make this seem a little bit more vibrant, even though that whole concept is black and white with a bit of green. That image does nothing besides help accentuate your content. And that's the sort of images you need to look for. It doesn't have to be on a white background. It could be on whatever color background you want. But try to be consistent. If you're picking, a general scheme of black and white, try to find images that have a lot more white space, that will add color just enough to help you accentuate your pieces of important content and not take away from it. Now this side, honestly, when I first landed on it, the first thing that caught my eye was this ad. It had nothing to do with the site, but the ad stood out so well because it was so neatly designed. I mean, the color is perfect. It's got tons of white space around it. The lettering is very simple, nothing complicated. So as soon as you land on it, you see the ad. You're completely missing his logo up here. Or there's a view tutorial thing up here until you actually take your time to process it. Your brain needs to catch up with your eye for a bit there. I mean, it's great there's this orange and black contrast, but it's so far out compared to this, right? And you don't know that's where you're supposed to click, especially if you're landing here. And if you look at this green versus this black, the contrast is not there enough. So it's very hard to even understand what the logo really is doing here and why the nav is kind of green. Like, it just throws you off a little. And it's just the contrast. So if instead of that green, if they had white throughout, that would be the first thing you see. You'd understand where you're supposed to go, what you're supposed to click, what you're supposed to scroll. This ad would not be taking the spotlight for your site. So again, these are not revolutionary concepts. They are the basic bread and butter stuff everybody tells you guys. It's just very easy for you to miss them because they're so common. So something ever seems off on your site, check the white space first. Then check if you're being consistent. If you've got anything more than 3s, go back and fix it. And check your contrast. The better contrast you have, the more easily it is to pick up what you're trying to say. So that's really the talk. Any questions, concerns? Thank you. You guys have any questions, or you guys are all set, you're all knowledgeable, and you're off to do your things? Okay, great. I think. Yeah, I mean, I would highly suggest not going towards neons. But besides that, pick a color that's, that works well solid and that maybe you can have a little shading with, So if you make it a little darker, it won't look too bad. And if you make it a little lighter, it won't look too bad, which will give you enough flexibility with the color. So if you want to underline something without being too obvious about it, you can still adjust without it being too obvious. Yes? When I say 3 colors, I mean 3 colors in the whole concept of it. So yes, the white space, if your background is white, that is your color. There's a color there. If your background is blue or gray, that's a color. And don't forget that you can reuse that color in other ways to give you contrast too, right? Any other questions? Yes?
This might seem obvious, but some people it's not necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know how to juxtaposition the colors in such a way as to get the most contrast?
So, great question. For all the people who is a little challenged on that, myself included, I usually do something like Adobe Cooler, which lets me actually look through combinations of colors, right? And then I'll actually like to play with it a little bit too, in the sense of putting it up, making a box with the color on the background and the text in the forefront, and if it works, vice versa. And that gives you, if it doesn't work both ways, where if it's a background and the text, or the text and the background, then there's a problem. The contrast is an issue at that point, right? But if it works both ways kind of okay, you're okay. Adobe Cooler is a great resource in trying to get you a variety of colors, and I think there's others called Pixel and stuff online. And you can actually look through, contrasting colors or complementary colors, and that kind of gives you a good balance to see what works and what doesn't, right? Yeah, so grayscale also works in that sense, and there's also, I believe, shading of different colors you get, all sorts of variety, and you can do combinations based on that. But again, test your combination out on a, Word document or something just to see if it works first, right? Yes. Videos are great, but they should not be too long, because unless that's the point of your background, and you have nothing else at that point, it's foreground. And they should also repeat, so they're doing the same thing over and over again, so not too long. And again, your content is more important than the video. Try to desaturate the video, make it not so obvious. The movement in itself will catch a user's eye. So you don't need too much for the video to show up, right? So you can do black and white videos, or even a video with an overlay on top, so the text stands out much better. Again, short, not too many motions, and a replace. That way, even if they miss it and it becomes an annoyance, they can, rewind and helps them settle a bit. Yes?
That's kind of a follow-on question on what you asked about
Slideshows are totally fine. And then, in fact, they're so standardized now that we're used to those patterns. Like seeing a pattern of a thing moving, we're so used to that because everything had it at one point, right? So stuff like that where the pattern's already been established. Like if I put 3 lines up there, you guys know instantly that's a menu button or a toggle button, right? Those are patterns that have already been established. You're not reestablishing a new pattern. So as long as you like fit the same kind of look and feel that most slideshows have, it'll work seamlessly just because everybody's seen it before, right? Yes? Mm-hmm. Yep. Which is a great idea, and usually what most branding people do as well, to make sure you are competing, you're trying to convey the same or similar message. So if you look, a lot of businessy, corporate-y places have that weird blue everywhere, or shades of that blue everywhere. It's because they're trying to be sophisticated tech people, right? And that's just how it is. And it's, again, pattern recognition. People always, like, why do we say blue is depressing or blue is towards tech? It's patterns, right? It's been re-emphasized in our brains. So when we look at it, that's what we think. So stuff like that is going a little too deep into color theory. And if you just need a color ASAP, Google it, be like, for this kind of project, what's a good color? Google has answers for everything. Yes. So it doesn't matter to some extent, and to some extent it does. So for example, if you're looking at a screen with a lot of light from outside already hitting that screen, and you have a white background, it becomes really hard to see. But if you have a dark background, it makes it easier. Now, our eyes normally rest on the black spots. It's easier for us to rest on the black than the white. The white actually exhausts our eye. So like Spotify is supposed to help you relax, supposed to be kind of fun and give you music whichever way you want. And their idea here is to emphasize the music and see the content. So one of the things their use cases was, what if you're lying in bed and you've got Spotify going on? Do you want it really glaring? Hence the black really works well because it's not so much for your eyes to process. It's easier for you to nod off or easier for you to dismiss. Versus the white will pop right out. It will like make this is why when you read on the laptop, your eyes get exhausted. It's because of all that white. So to avoid eye exhaustion, a lot of people do a little bit of gray just to kind of balance it out. So again, it's your use case. Like, are you worried about people staring at it for too long? Does it need to be used in places with high glare? Or if it's just like a regular side, then it's your preference, right? And I would suggest away from the dark unless you're trying to do something very like music-oriented or something much more relaxing, like much more casual rather than professional. Just because a lot of professional sites, again, patterns. If you have like a really savvy professional tech site with black theme, most people will pause just because. There's no logical reason, just because they will pause, right? So just step away from that sense. Any more questions? Yes. Mm-hmm. It is. So the whole floating labels part, that's a new pattern, and a lot of people have not really gotten familiar with it. I mean, so if my client was somebody who wants to try something new, be playful with their website, that would make sense. Like, following patterns is not always the right thing to do. Sometimes breaking a pattern is okay if that's what the brand calls for, right? So if it's like a really playful brand of some sort, that would make sense. But for a regular person trying to get some important information out there, that would be really annoying, right? Material design, I actually like a lot of the concepts of material design. I just don't like Google's documentation on Angular. So using Angular material makes my life miserable. But the ideas of where they layer things, the way they have the cards, the way they have some of the icons already preset, all of that actually makes the designer's life a lot easier because you guys are already used to using those patterns. The general populace who doesn't know anything about tech, doesn't know anything about design, are so familiar with it because they have an Android or because they have a tablet or whatever. Even if I screw up a little bit, they will still be able to go through it, right? So it'll handle the outlier use cases a little better than something customized in that sense, which is also why iOS is so finicky about forcing you to use their guidelines so strictly. Yes?
How do you avoid the danger of using patterns that everyone knows, but then having a site that
I understand your concern there. And a lot of people are trying to step away from the bootstrap bit. Again, one of the ways I've noticed is to purposefully break patterns. So everybody knows a bootstrap button is, what, 10, 15 pixels radius, border radius or so? Break it. Have 5, have 2, have none. And those kind of smaller changes will let you still keep the grid, but everything else kind of looks different, right? Use Font Awesome or some other sort of your custom own icon sheets in addition to that. You can still follow the regular layout of, column extra small 12 with your one content, the next section of next content, and alternating colors. But just smaller things like different image, different kind of font style, different ways of arranging your font. So like maybe not having a left aligned, but having right or middle aligned or something a little bit more organic will all help. And you're still following a grid just to make your front-end developer's life, easier, especially when you're considering mobile. But it's just quirky and different enough that it'll be kind of unique, right? And now moving towards the age where we're trying to crank out a site a day sometimes. Bootstrap is very easy. I would also suggest Flexbox because it forces you to actually do some more extra work into it, which helps you make it a little bit more different than a regular Bootstrap site. And again, the reason somebody knows it's a Bootstrap site, it's never just the grid. Nobody can tell it from the grid. It's usually all the other elements that go in with it. So your icons, your buttons, how your navigation looks, the font used, those give it away. So change those things and nobody will know. It's like magic. Anything else? Awesome, great.